Hey everyone, welcome to the Good, Brave, and Heroic podcast. I am here with my husband, Eric. What is that? That wasn't a peace sign. It wasn't, I don't know. Are you done?
Yes.
Today, actually, first of all, let's acknowledge that we haven't done a podcast in a while. A lot has been going on in the Munoz household, but we're here. We are here. Hello. So today we are going to be talking about difficult conversations in relationships, and that was motivated by a conversation we were having with a close friend. So we are going to share our experiences or the things that we got out of our own experiences, just talking with other people, other couples, and how they deal with that. And yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things that stood out to me as I eavesdropped on your conversation earlier was
It was on speaker.
was the fact that you said this really stood out to me, that you said that a lot of times, because today you said relationships, but we're going to focus on romantic relationships. And a lot of times when we have some type of like disagreement or we need to have a tough conversation with a friend, we're typically more willing to have that conversation with that friend than as opposed to when we have some type of disagreement or issue with our person, right? Our person. It could be a little bit harder, especially before you're married, where you kind of go through this whole crisis where you're just like, nah, she's not the one. She can't be the one for me, or he can't be the one for me because the situation is either so dire or you're just like, oh, I don't like this friction. And you get past that real lovey-dovey stage that's in the beginning. And now you have your first conflict and you're wondering, is this the person that I really want to marry? But I think that we would both agree that if you are looking to have a successful relationship, then you have to be committed to having difficult conversations. In fact, you have to be committed to getting good at it. Mm-hmm. Like you have to commit to really, really putting in work to being able to grow in that area together and individually. And not everybody is willing to do that, right? I think for most people, we kind of just want the relationship to work. Mm-hmm. Like we all have this hope or false like idea that when you have a good relationship, that means that things just always work out. Mm-hmm. And no, you have to put work into your relationship. And the fact that you are having difficulty does not always mean that you have a bad relationship.
No.
Right? You don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. All of a sudden you have a disagreement. It's like, oh, that's it. I knew I was never going to find nobody. And you just start throwing everything out. And all of a sudden, you're giving up on the relationship and you're ready. No, like the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter how dope of a person you are, how great your relationship is, how amazing your connection is, how good you guys connect, how emotionally connected you guys are, and how much butterflies or eagles you get in your stomach when you look at them that are fluttering all over the place. It doesn't matter. If you are a human being in a relationship with another human being, you are going to have conflict, even if you are both amazing. So I think that's something that needs to be gotten out of the way immediately, because I would hope that helps everybody to breathe a sigh of relief. Like, oh,
It's normal.
Everybody, yeah, it's normal. Everybody has difficulty, and we're okay. Like, we can do this.
Um, man. So when you were talking about how this is something that you even practice with, like just in daily life with different relationships, I think about how you have to take into account how deep and intentional or how important that relationship is if it's a friendship and how much you're going to invest in that. And I think you've made your decision when you chose someone to be your life partner.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to acknowledge that every relationship, if it's a very important and deep relationship, it takes work, which means it takes intentionality. And I'm not sitting here and saying, you know, like sit through and suffer through all the sufferings, but because if you're in a boyfriend girlfriend relationship and you know that one thing is having difficult conversations because you're having disagreement. Another thing is hitting the same wall because you guys have fundamentally you're just not, there are non-negotiables that are being argued about that you're honestly like, if you're never going to budge on them and they're a non-negotiable, then maybe you do need to reassess
Yeah.
if that relationship is worth continuing.
That's
We're
gold
talking
for
about,
anybody who's not married.
yeah. So we're talking about like,
Hold on, I'm sorry. Let's pause there for a
okay.
second. Don't because there might be people who are not married listening,
Okay.
and I don't want you to brush past that because that's so good what you just said. I was about to let it go, and I was like, nah. Let me pull a Tim Ross because you know how he'll just be like, whoa, hold up. That's a good hold up moment because non-negotiables are really important, and you'd be surprised how many people get married and they don't talk about them.
Or they expect the other person to change or that they're going to change them. So for an example, a very easy example. I want kids, he doesn't have kids. And we knew that from the beginning. We've argued about it, but we decide that we're going to get married anyway. We get married, and now we still stand on the same opposite sides.
Yeah. I mean, what people don't realize is that you can be in love with somebody that you're not compatible with.
Yeah.
And if, like, kids is a big one. It's simple, but it's a big one because there's varying degrees to it. Again, it's about what's non-negotiable to you. Just because kids is a big topic, it doesn't necessarily mean that for you it's a non-negotiable. Maybe it is a negotiable. But somebody like me, who, when I was like 6 years old, I used to think forward to the day that I became a father and wanting to father my children well. Because I wanted to give them a relationship with a father as a gift to them. I'm thinking about this like at 6, 7, 8 years old because of what I wanted my relationship with my parents to be, and it didn't quite reach that. And so I'm like, oh, when I'm a father, I want to be this. So I grow up with this, come to know Jesus, and then for me, I feel like one of my purposes in life is to be not just a father, but to be an amazing father. And so it would never work. It would never work. It's just not going to happen. Like,
well, let's get a little spicy.
I don't know what's coming, guys. I'm sorry.
I'm a Christian and I want to honor God by not having sex before marriage. You may or may not be a Christian. That's not really important to you. You don't see the value in that. You want to.
Yeah.
You want to have sex before marriage and you don't see the big deal.
Ooh, ha ha.
That's hard.
That is difficult because when you negotiate with your non-negotiables,
it's dangerous.
You're compromising a piece of who you are. You are compromising a piece of what makes who you are. And you're doing it in the name of love, not realizing that love would never make you do that. And so, like if you're at the point where you're in a relationship and you're finding yourself negotiating non-negotiables, you have to pause for a second. Because like the example that you just gave, right? If you say, it's okay, that's all right, it's going to affect you.
Mm-hmm.
It will affect you. It's going to affect your relationship. Now, obviously, there's grace, right? But now we're specifically talking on negotiating non-negotiables. That person, what typically happens when you negotiate non-negotiables is that when the relationship then becomes difficult, resentment that was planted now rises to the surface.
Yeah.
Right? So if you forced me to do something or to accept something or to be cool with something that I wasn't cool with and I did it because of love, now when things become difficult or rocky in our relationship, that seed that was planted now grows into resentment. Another big example that what's one that it was this Disney movie with what's this kid's name, the High School Musical guy?
Oh,
Zac Efron,
yes.
right? Where he, man, I hope some other people listening have seen this movie. The movie's about him and his wife when they're older, and he goes back in time and becomes his younger self again. And he's like a basketball star. But when they were in high school, he was gonna go to play college or something like that, and his girl got pregnant. His wife, she got pregnant, and he decided to marry her and give up his career in basketball. And so when he was older, he resented her for it. Like their relationship didn't go as well, and I think they were getting a divorce. And he resented her because he gave up his career to go and start a family. Can't remember what you remember. You ever remember?
Not.
Okay,
Sorry.
But that's a perfect example of it where he then like does the whole not going back in time, but he becomes his younger self again and gets to go back to high school. And I think he's in high school with his kids. And
I think I remember this.
Yeah. There's a couple movies who have done this trope, right? And he actually even meets his wife as his younger self, and she's like freaked out because she knows how he looked. And he's playing basketball again. And basically the long story is that he realizes that, if I remember correctly, that the sacrifice was worth it and he wants to be with her. But not everybody gets that
do-over.
Yeah. And if you never have that conversation, at the very least have the conversation.
Yeah.
Do not ignore it.
No.
Because now you're holding something inside of you, and things that are planted give fruit.
That's good.
Things that are planted give fruit. So if you don't want bad fruit to come out of that, don't plant it. Talk about it.
You're preaching.
I do be preaching sometimes. I do that sometimes, right? But it's true. It's like we got to be able to have those conversations. You and I, like that was a big thing for us. We were already friends, so we already kind of knew what our non-negotiables were, and we were on the same page.
Yeah.
And so that's not an issue for us, but we've seen so many different people go through that, and then you have issues in the future because you don't want to have the tough conversation.
Or because you wanted to please that other person, so you became a shell of yourself because you just kept doing things out of love, but really you started to compromise yourself and just wanting to please that other person. And then you just kind of like live this, it's not a full love. It's not full relationship. It's not a full, honest, safe bubble.
Yeah.
It's not.
Because who's going to want a compromised version of you anyway?
Right. And then eventually it blows up because eventually you're going to, you blow up. This stuff festers. And like you said, feelings are just there and they grow and it gets really, really messy. And really unfortunate things start to happen. And then you're like, how did this happen? And you're like, well, here's my list of how this happened.
Yeah.
And it's just really, really sad because a lot of people end up hurt. And So talk about your non-negotiables. If you don't know what those are, think about what those non-negotiables are. It's always a really good way to just assess whether the person that you're interested in is something that you're looking for, something that you need to be entertaining. And moving on to the difficult conversations, while those are part of your difficult conversations to have, it's normal to have conversations that make you uncomfortable. It's normal to have conversations where it's normal to disagree. It's normal to have different points of views. What's not okay, what has been normalized that needs to be broken is I have my point of view, you have your point of view, we're never going to see eye to eye, so I'm just going to avoid it, and I'm just going to whatever, you're on your side, I'm on my side, and it is what it is. Or the opposite, the who can scream louder to get your point, to be heard or get your point across. That's what's been normalized that needs to be unlearned, because that's not that. I think really early in our marriage, I learned we are a team. It's not you versus me. And if our goal is to really make this work, then we need to act that way, even when we feel like we're on opposite sides of something. If I feel like you wronged me or vice versa, we are still a team. So that means that whatever issue or offense that was committed by the other party in that relationship, that needs to be brought to the table like it's a third party outsider, an intruder. And you two come together and address that. And then that person, whoever was wrong, if there is someone to blame for something, you own up to it. You own up to it, and then you say, okay, let's assess how are we gonna deal with this? But you have to have the conversation.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways that you could eliminate yourself or bow out of the conversation, whether that's not being willing to have it from jump. Maybe one person is like, hey, can we talk about this? And you're just like, nah. But that's not the only way. You might be present for the conversation and not participatory. And it's important to buy in. It's important to be fully present. And I know that that's something that as a man, I struggled with. I struggled with being able to have the emotional maturity, the tools, the things necessary to be able to say it, just because I wasn't taught those things. And instead, it was a lot easier for me to default to my own defense mechanisms, the way that I observed other people handling things, or to my emotions even, which there's a difference between being emotionally attuned, whereas you have emotions, and being emotionally mature. They're not the same thing. But all of those different ways that we can kind of bow out of that conversation can be so hurtful towards the health of your relationship, right? If you're not having these difficult conversations and doing so in a way that honors that other person, that creates a safe space for them, that, like I was saying, just helps them to be their full selves, then the way I like to think about it, and this really motivates me, is that when I'm doing that, I am literally creating a space for you that tells you it is more important to be less of you. And I don't like that, right? So one of the ways that I motivate myself to be committed is if I don't get over myself in this moment, if I don't say what needs to be said, if I need to say, you know what, I messed up and I'm sorry, and can we have a conversation about it right now, instead of letting 3 hours pass by and say, you know what, the way I said that came out totally wrong. I'm really sorry. This is what I meant. I apologize for that. Can we have a conversation? If I'm not willing to do that, then for those 3 hours, what I'm telling you is that what's more important to me is that you stay quiet and that you leave me alone. And that means that you're less of yourself. And I started telling myself that because it's very motivating, because at the end of the day, I know that that's not what I want. I don't want a space where my wife feels like she needs to be less of herself. I want a space where you flourish. What's a space that you would flourish in when we have difficulty? A space where I am emotionally strong enough to put how I feel to the side and value you in that moment instead. That's love. And every time that I have done that, I always am happy with the outcome, because you see in that moment that I got over myself, for lack of a better way of saying it, and I say what needs to be said, even though it was hard for me to get past my pride or whatever emotion it is that I'm feeling, my stubbornness or whatever. And boy, can I be stubborn. But she just made you said it, I didn't face, but whatever. We might need to have a difficult conversation right here on the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. But you get what I'm saying? Like, when I think about it that way, I'm not thinking anymore about how much I'm right and how upset I am. All of that goes away because I'm thinking about you and how you feel. And I'm like, wait, hold up. What am I communicating right now to this person that I love and I read vows to? What am I communicating to her in this moment? Am I showing up for her right now?
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you bottle up what you're feeling and your thoughts and stuff. It just gives you perspective on how to approach that conversation a very different way. Because we all are going to react to whatever the situation is. We're going to have our normal innate reaction to it. That could be heavy. It could be strong, passionate. But when you reframe your thinking about, we're on the same team, I love them, you have to think about, what is the goal? Mm-hmm. Is it to make my point be heard and have them just accept it? Or is it, I want to be understood. Let's talk about how I can be understood, and where is she coming from?
That's so good. That's so good.
And sometimes that takes, and I know that we're making it sound maybe a little simple. It's not. It's really hard to get there. We still have our
it's
disagreements.
Simple, but it's not easy.
Right. Our conversations, our difficult conversations are still very difficult. We are sharing some ways to have that kind of healthy conversation. But it's still hard for us. We still fall in the learned traps of, I'm just not going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Or I'm going to be petty because this is the moment to do that. Like, you deserve that. Or whatever it is. It's still hard, but it takes intentionality. It takes grit. It takes, how am I going to apply that sacrificial love that Jesus applies, by showing up to be myself, but also welcoming you to working on it together. And that, I think, takes a lot of building of trust, because if you're not on the same page, if only one person is thinking that way and the other person's like, nah, no, that's too, that might be too vulnerable for somebody else.
Yeah.
You have to build to that level of trust, and that took a lot for us to get to that place. Like, one person might be coming into the relationship like, I want to be vulnerable, and the other person might be coming in like, that's too hard for me. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of talking through that before even having the conversation about whatever the disagreement was.
Yeah.
It's about, like, if we want to get through this issue, we need to talk about, how willing are you to be vulnerable so that we can work through this together?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you gotta take 10 steps back.
Yeah. Before
you can even get to like you said, it took us a while, not that long, but it took in light of other couples who never make it. I think we didn't take that long, but it's really about being committed to figuring it out, both people in the relationship, because The worst thing is when both people aren't committed. But equally as bad is when one is and one isn't, because you can't get anything done.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that in order for you to be able to have the best possible marriage you can have, both of you have to be committed to your marriage, to your relationship. If both of you are not committed, and this is in different areas and different things and aspects of your marriage, both personally and together, if you're not, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Men specifically, if you are coasting in your relationship is not coasting. Relationships don't coast. They may coast for a small season, but eventually you're going to start deviating. And if you start coasting for a little too long, you're going to find yourself confused when your partner, your wife, is not on the same page with you. Because you thought things were good, but you went for 8 months thinking things were good and you didn't do nothing in the relationship.
Right.
You didn't go out for one date night. You didn't have one conversation. You didn't ask her a question about her day for 3 months. Or maybe it's flowers. Maybe it's quality time. And listen, let me tell you something. We are the poster childs of understanding that there is a season where you can't do everything, right? We have small children right now. We are working hard. And so we haven't been able to be as committed to date nights as we were before Lily was born. But we understand that, and we're both on the same page about it. The key is we've had conversations about it.
And we found other ways to pour into each other.
And we check in with each other. I check in with you like, hey, we haven't had, maybe I don't say it this way, but just for as an example, like, hey, we haven't had date night for a while. Are you good? Or just recently, a few weeks ago, I really needed to spend time with you. And you wanted to do, I forgot something after bedtime. We put the girls down. And I said, babe, I really just want to sit down and watch TV with you for an hour before I go to sleep. And you were like, okay. I communicated to you that I needed that. Like, I just needed to be next to you watching TV for an hour. I felt like I needed that with you in that moment. And I communicated it. And you were like, okay. And we enjoyed that time together. And so those difficult conversations can not sometimes do not always have to be big things.
Yeah.
Sometimes they could be small things, because sometimes it's difficult for us to communicate that we need something.
Yeah. I know that's hard for me.
I know it's hard for you.
Yeah. Especially because I think I hear a lot of my women friends too say, like, why do I have to say it? Like, why can't you just know? Why can't you just know?
Yeah.
But you just don't always know.
Yeah.
And it gets busier when you are in a marriage and you have children and now you're super adulting. It just gets even busier. So a lot of things just start flying. Yeah. And that's when you get into the dangers of coasting as the husband or as the wife, and your daily routine. And routines are great, but then you fall into the trap of routines and everything becomes kind of mediocre and gray. And that's when it gets easy to coast and just you stop paying attention.
Yeah.
And you start to get a little resentful because it's like, oh, he didn't, blah, 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 blah. Why do I have to keep telling you, blah, 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 blah. And you may be right. Like, why do I have to keep telling you to do this? But we're human. We're human. And that even saying, I need this, I need a hug, I need you to listen to me, I need to talk, I need to go out with you for a drive, I need a cup of coffee with you, I need you to tell me whatever, to affirm me more, is hard because it feels like it's too vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And
when that's exactly what a marriage should be, right? But I get what you're saying, because it's like, oh, I just let down, because we go through life letting that bridge down and finding people not respecting that bridge. And it might be the case in your marriage that your partner doesn't respect your bridge. And that's a whole other issue. But if they do, honor them with the vulnerability to let the bridge down and invite them over. And on the inverse of that, I want you to continue, by the way. I'm sorry for interrupting. On the inverse of that, be a student of your partner,
That's good.
right? The way I motivate myself, I don't know if I think I've told you this before, but each person has an inner world, their own inner world. It's yours. And so I have dedicated my life to studying your inner world. That's important to me. That's why I ask you a lot of silly questions. Like, if you do this, if you were in this situation, what would you do? And you're like, I don't know. I'm not in that situation. And I'm like, well, pretend you are, or what's your favorite thing of this and that? Because I just want to understand how your mind thinks. And I don't ever want to stop wanting to understand you, right? Because
You're getting real Tony Dice on me, by the way. It's that one song that keeps playing in my head.
which one? Oh, El Doctorado.
El Doctorado.
Doctorado. Yeah, that's funny. You just took me back to high school. That's hilarious. But yeah, that's true. And the thing is about it too is that your person, your spouse or your partner is constantly changing.
Yeah.
So just when you think you understand them, there's something new about them that you probably don't even know about.
And the beauty of that is, though, that you could be changing and growing together rather than,
In your own two worlds.
yeah, you could be, that's such a good opportunity to combine your worlds. I mean, you still are your individual person, but it's so beautiful to see how that other person grows alongside you and how that you build on the chemistry that was there from the beginning. It just becomes more like that. That's a way to continue the spark.
Yeah, absolutely. You can continue to spark with that because when we show interest in another person, that makes that other person feel valued and seen. And how there's this amazing Tim Keller quote. I think it's Tim Keller. I don't even know. Can you pass me your phone real quick? I gotta find this quote. Talk about nice stuff while I look for this real quick.
It's just put in the captions, like right here, nice stuff or nice things. Here, serving you nice things. Okay, so it's taking longer. So while he is looking that up,
I found it.
I don't have to say nice things.
Yeah, sorry, I just saved you. Okay. To be loved, it is Tim Keller, by the way. To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But I get emotional. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us.
That's exactly what it's like.
To be fully known and still loved. And that's hard because
That's really deep.
all of us, I think every single one of us, unless you're a psychopath or really not self-aware, most of us would be terrified of being fully known by another person.
Yeah.
Because I know for me at least, I think that if somebody fully knows me, there's no way they could love me. And yet God does. And so I've lived most of my life pushing people away because my internal monologue is the more that you know me, the more likely that you will not love me. And that showed up in our marriage, right? Especially early on, where I'm about to get real vulnerable right now,
Okay.
where I would constantly say to you, I'm a monster. If you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. They probably didn't even understand what I just said. If you knew me, you wouldn't love me. And I remember, especially one day when we were in couples therapy,
We did it.
we did it. Let me tell you. And we did it when we were like
Doing
pretty
really
good.
well.
We were doing good. Like we didn't need it, quote unquote. There was no
reason.
but it was solid. And if it weren't for America's insurance system, we would still be doing it, I think. Anyways. And I remember you said, you told me, you know what? I don't remember what you told me, but I just remember you didn't run away, but you pulled me in. And that was a huge landmark in our marriage for me. That moment, because I had said that to you a lot of times, and I just looked into your eyes in that moment, and all I saw was love.
I remember that moment.
I don't remember what you said, but I remember the moment.
I don't remember what I said.
And it was like all of that dissolved. And if I wasn't willing to, maybe I wouldn't even be willing to say those words. Because even me saying that was me being vulnerable.
That was super vulnerable.
Oh, yeah, right? As men, we struggle with even saying what we really feel, because I think that culture and society tells us, like, there's people probably that might see this and be like, yo, this dude is crying. What's wrong with him, right? And you're missing the point. But anyways.
Man up.
But in a world that tells men constantly to not be emotional and then says, why aren't you available? Right? I chose in that moment to be vulnerable enough to say something to you that I really believed wasn't true. And because I did, it opened up a moment for you to show me love. And it was huge.
You took a really big risk in that moment to
Oh
be super vulnerable with someone that you already chose to live the rest of your life with.
Exactly, right? Which is funny.
And you took the risk, and then you said, here is all of me. Because that quote that you read was beautiful, beautiful. But when you are known by someone, you are known by someone. It's not just the pretty things, the beautiful things. It's also the mistakes. It's also the unresolved things. It's also the dark things. It's also the really messy things that aren't all figured out. Because when you marry someone, they don't have it figured out.
Yeah.
They don't. Even the most perfect person, the most ideal person, does not have it figured out. And when you take a risk like that, it's really, 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 really hard, because then you have to sit there and wait, like, what's going to happen next? And I remember how hard it was to hear that. Every time that you said that, I was always shocked, and I always felt pushed further away. But because of who I am, I was like, nah. So it was like every time, like, I felt like the arm out, I was just like, get out of here. And I pushed it harder. And that's hard to do. You know, everyone has their own way of dealing with things. And I remember always finding ways to claw my way back. Like, no, we're in this together. We're a team. We're a team. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because we all have our unresolved things, our messy things about us. So that I'm like, no, I know you. I know you. I might not know everything about you, but I know you.
Yeah.
And we're going to tear apart this irrational thought. We're going to tear it apart. It took a lot of work. And that took a lot of me having to put aside maybe things that offended me or that hurt me. Eventually we got to those things. But we had to take 10 steps back.
Yeah, that's so good.
To build that trust, that security, to then talk about, all right, now you're in a better space, and so am I, to talk about these issues.
And the crazy part about it is that, I don't want to speak for you, and you tell me if I'm wrong, right? Which wouldn't make any sense to me, but it was worth it.
It was.
It was hard, but it was worth it. I was just in another place. And because I didn't have, right, I didn't have the tools that you had.
Well, I didn't have tools either.
I know, but you had better tools than me, I think. I
think you were depressed, clinically depressed. I was not.
Yeah.
Suffering from something like that. I was just in a different place.
Yeah.
But I also, there were definitely moments that I could highlight where I contributed to, in conversations where, instead of it being a conversation, I was like, you're gonna hear what I have to say, and it's not gonna be cute. And I contributed in different ways as well, because I'm human and it's normal, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna curse you out right now, and you're gonna take it because you deserve it. And is that right of me?
Hermana.
No, it's real. It's real. That's how I felt.
No, I'm just laughing because the religious people are probably like, what?
I was thinking about whether I should say that or not, but it's real. I'm human.
No, we gonna be real.
And there were moments where I'm like, nah, you're gonna hurt. You're gonna feel this. If I have to feel this, you're gonna feel it too. Well, that's not contributing. This is stuff that I learned, growing up, get revenge. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think about it now because I'm like, you're someone I claim to love. We're supposed to be on the same team.
Yeah.
And you're wounded right now. Mm-hmm. So I want to kick you while you're down too. Mm-hmm. You're not even in your whole full self right now. There's no grace. I wasn't taught to show people grace, honestly.
Because you weren't given grace.
I wasn't given grace. I just had to figure it out. And a lot of that is also just the kind of that comes with, unfortunately, in our ethnic Hispanic culture. You just got to figure it out. That's how you become resilient. Mm-hmm. You just got to figure it out. Ain't no time for tears. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Ain't no time to have these hard conversations. I'm right, you're wrong. Let's acknowledge that and move on because we got things to do.
And that both people leave thinking they're right and they're upset with the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that time was really difficult. It was really painful, especially when I would hear you say those things. But as resilient as my culture and upbringing made me, and as resilient and tenacious as God turned me into, I was like, no, I'm praying for this man and we're going to get through this. We're going to fight through this. And we're going to get through this. And we're going to have the conversations when we have them. And for me, I wanted to run into having those conversations because I was uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, which led me to ask so many questions. Mm-hmm. But I learned through that, wait, we might need to take some more steps back to figure out, we need to rebuild this trust, this security, this friendship. Mm-hmm. To then deal with the other issues.
And that's the thing. When you're in that relationship with the other person, at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself whether you're committed to doing what's necessary to make it work.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it perfectly.
No.
You're going to mess up. Throughout our marriage, we have had moments where we didn't handle a conversation well, or I mean, you just don't get it right all the time. That's not the message here.
It's practicing it.
The message is just two people who are willing to commit and be creative enough, depending on the season that you're in, to figure out, okay, what's the pivot that I need to make right now, right? Asking questions and trying to understand isn't really working. He's shutting down. Okay, let me try something different. Let me think through, let me sit down, let me journal.
Or let me ask.
Let me
what
ask
would be more
what would
helpful?
let me ask what would be more helpful, or that person is not fulfilling a specific need you need conversationally because of whatever season they're going through. And so saying, okay, I'm not feeling this need right now, so I need to reach out to my close friends. But it is a creative thing at times. And also making sure that your relationship with God is right. Because if you're not there with God, that just makes things like it means
It makes it harder.
it makes it so much harder.
Because you also don't know, like, how to discern, do I need to take this up with him right now, or do I need to take it up to God first?
Yeah.
I know there were so many times where I had conversations with you, difficult conversations with you, and they just didn't pan out. And I'd get really frustrated with you. And then eventually, like in my prayer time with God, I'm like, God, like, check your son, because I'm about to check him. Like, what is it? I don't know what other words to use here. Like, what do I do? And then I would feel God not even telling me, well, you're wrong or you're right, but telling me, let it go. Don't talk to him about it anymore. Start praying about it.
Mm.
And I did. And I'm like, okay, I guess that means you're going to talk to him and convict him, because, and I did. And I let it go. And that was hard to do, but I let it go. I didn't talk to him about it anymore. I started praying daily about whatever the situation was, something that I wanted for him or whatever it was. And then out of nowhere, you're like, I was talking to God and da-da-da-da-da, and I decided I'm going to start doing this. And I'm just like,
Yeah, what's the thing with that is that we typically want immediate results for things that God has a long-term plan for.
that's good.
And if you would just talk to him about it, he would tell you like, hey, I need you to be patient in this season. Or he might tell you something crazy as, let's not talk about that right now. Like for a long time, I couldn't talk to God, or not that I couldn't. I wanted to talk to God about my pain of never becoming a pastor. And you know what he would tell me every time? We're not going to talk about that right now. It's only recently that we've started to talk through that, and I feel God like ministering to me about that. And it's the same in a relationship. It's like that person might not be ready, and that doesn't mean you need to get a divorce. Like seriously, right? Like, because some people go there. It's like that person might not be there. It doesn't mean that they'll never be there. And so it's a nuanced situation where sometimes we need to be able to have the conversation, be committed to it, but also be creative about it and consult God about it, and really work all of those areas so that we achieve the result that we want, which is a happy and fulfilling relationship that takes work.
Yeah.
Right? And don't expect immediate results. Because you're typically not going to get that. Because the thing about it is, and it's also selfish to expect that. I know I have, right? But I'm expecting you to be somewhere that I've arrived before you. And not realizing that I didn't get there in one day. It took me time to get there, right? It took me a certain upbringing, maybe, a certain thing that my parents taught me, maybe, or things that I did research in or learned through difficulties in life that you did not go through.
Yeah.
And I expect you to I might be right. Maybe I'm right, but I expect you to just get it. All right, bro.
Sorry.
That's not fair. It's not fair. Maybe God has a process to bring you through. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the one that's being processed. Meanwhile, I'm over here throwing a fit at you, and I'm wrong.
Yeah, but when you're consulting God, God exposes you and exposes where, because it's so nuanced. It's not always about who's right or who's wrong, unless there's like something super black and white, like you cheated, well, then you're wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong. And even that is super nuanced too and complicated. But my point is that when you're consulting God, you invite Him to expose everything. It's not just to expose the other person, it's also you. You have to be willing to allow yourself to be put under His light, because there's always something that each of us is contributing. Whether it's our mindset that we go into a conversation with, or into the relationship with, or into a specific situation with, or it's our tone, or it's our whatever. It can be so many things. But when you're consulting God, you're allowing Him to filter you before approaching a conversation or an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to, it takes work to allow Him to do that. Like, you have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
You have to,
Vulnerable.
you have to want it. You have to want it.
Yeah.
Because our typical and our usual predisposition towards God is to not pay attention to Him. It's not even running away. It's just like, I'm living my life. Every once in a while, oh, hey, God, what's up with this? But living a life of total surrender to what God wants you to do and consistently seeking Him, that's a completely different lifestyle. And that's the cheat code for your marriage. Mm-hmm. That is the cheat code. Because then you're not going to get frustrated at things that God says, I have a plan for that.
Yeah.
If you trust Him, right? Like, if you bring it to Him and He's like, don't even worry about that. Don't talk about it for the season. I got you. Okay. So the question really then becomes, do you trust Him, and are you even talking to Him about it? Because if you talk to Him about it, that's the great first step. And then if He tells you what He tells you, but then the question is, do you trust Him? Mm-hmm. If you have both of those things, you're good.
Yeah.
Like, you can navigate a lot with that.
Yeah.
And then if you're having those conversations with your spouse, that's a recipe right there for a really fulfilling relationship.
Agreed.
So, I think it's a good place for us to... Focata.
No.
No. Trying to think of other sounds that I can't think of any. Guys, thank you so much for being here. We really hope that you receive something from this and can go ahead and have those difficult conversations that are necessary for the growth and health of your relationship. We hope that you guys enjoyed it, and we hope you guys have an amazing week, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week. God bless you guys. Have an amazing week. Peace.
Bye.